Doodles get it from both sides, really. The purebred people resent them because they're sort of impure breds in some way. And then the rescue people resent them because you paid for them, usually.
John, I've been looking forward to our chat today ever since I read your article in The New Yorker, which was truly a deep dive into doodles and the business of doodles and the politics of doodles.
Yeah, Corinne, I'm really happy to talk to you. I love talking doodles, so thanks for having me on the show.
No surprise, I do too. But something might surprise you. We were in the same room in January. We were both at the Goldendoodle Association of
Yeah,
North America conference.
I know, amazing.
I was chit-chatting with some of the breeders, but you and I were like the two exceptions of people in the room that aren't doodle breeders.
Right, you're right. Yeah, I had a nice time. It was nice.
The first day, and you kind of talked about this in your article, the first day was a bit more about the business of breeding,
Right.
right? And as a business owner, I'm a little more familiar with creating websites and branding and stuff. And the people in that room are more about building dogs and literally like breeding. Day two, as a non-breeder, was like really getting down and dirty into like artificial insemination
Right.
demos and tube feeding and OFA x-rays and all that.
Right. That was a little bit beyond what I needed for my
Yeah.
article. So I figured I wasn't really necessary to stick around.
Yes,
But
not at all. What I do think was interesting was the contrast between you going to Westminster. When I said this was a deep dive, like you really did do your research here, feeling like a bit of a pariah at Westminster to what you call DoodleCon.
DoodleCon. I
At
mean, I
this
went to
conference.
Meet the Breeds. I went to Meet the Breeds.
Oh,
Well, I
yes,
went to
yes,
Westminster too, but in the
yes.
article, I talk about going to Meet the Breeds, which was like 4 days after Westminster.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the same dogs were, because they're, Meet the Breeds is at Javits Center, and Westminster starts in Javits Center, and then the finals are in, Madison Square Garden.
So I
Yes.
have a similar experience as I'm in the professional dog industry, but I specialize in doodles. And so I have the same sort of experience when people ask, oh, what kind of dogs do you work with? And the response. So when people asked you what kind of dog you had, do you mind sharing with our listeners what that was like a little?
Yeah, so I went to Meet the Breeds, which is, as your listeners may know, is it's in the Javits Center in New York. So it's a very large exhibition. AKC, I think there are like 150 of the 220 so recognized breeds. So yeah, each breed has kind of its own pavilion with information, and then a breeder usually behind the desk. So yeah, I walked around and engaged breeders of different kinds of dogs in conversation. Clearly, I was a dog lover, very
Yeah.
enthusiastic. So inevitably, the question would arise, so what kind of dog do you have to me? And then I would usually tell them that I had a Goldendoodle. And at that moment, the vibe shift occurred, pretty major vibe shift. Sometimes it was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Like the Sheepadoodle, the sheepdog person was kind of funny when I told her I had a doodle, because it's like, well, at least you don't have a Sheepadoodle, you have a Goldendoodle. As you probably know, the poodle people are the ones that are the most kind of anti-doodle,
Yes.
quite reasonably, I suppose. And so when I went up to them, I was basically planning not to reveal that I was a doodle person. And I got into this nice conversation with someone named Joyce, whose show dog was right on the table, right in front of us, with like it's, show cut. And we had a nice chat. And I was going to give her my card. And as I always have, as we do, a roll of poop bags in my pocket, which inevitably, this happens all the time, you pull out like one bag and you get the whole roll, and then
Just
the roll
unspooled.
unspools. And so I did that, and the whole thing unspooled right in front of this person. And I was just kind of waiting for the question, like, oh, what kind of dog do you have? And I wasn't sure what I was going to say. In fact, I kind of thought I would just say I have a mutt, which I guess in their
That would fit
parlance
there.
would
Yeah.
probably be true. But she didn't ask, and I kind of hurried away. Later, I had a funny interaction with her because she read the article. I
Oh,
sent it
okay.
to her.
Yeah,
I
great.
sent it to her, and I said, "Okay, you never asked, but in fact, I have a golden doodle." And she sent me back actually a very nice email saying
Oh,
she
good.
loved the article. I used a word in the article that was this Filipino English word which is pronounced Gigil. The Oxford English Dictionary made it an official English language word last year. And Giggle means something that's so unbearably cute that you almost kind of want to pinch it.
Right.
Like you kind of want to like the idea of like squeezing something to death because it's so cute. That was my experience when I saw Herman, our dog, as a puppy for the very first time. I had that emotion. And so the poodle person said that she felt giggle while reading the article.
Oh,
So
that's so warm. I love that.
that was nice.
Yes, I felt like it really was so thoroughly researched and balanced of a look at all of the angles that people take with doodles and kind of dissecting it a little bit. You've had other breeds of dogs before Herman, right?
Yeah, I've grown up. I grew up with dogs. I grew up on a farm. I had a kind of a rural dog experience. So
Mm,
which means that there's often puppies nearby available. You don't really necessarily go looking for dogs. They kind of find
find
you in
you.
a certain way. And so I had a mix of both mongrels and then some purebreds. I had a standard. My dad had a standard poodle when I was born, and I actually think that dog is kind of like in the back of my mind
Mm,
because when Herman has a poodle cut, he often looks kind of like that dog. He was a full-size standard poodle. I had retrievers, which I loved, but hip dysplasia was a thing. And
yeah.
also cancer was the way that dog died, and that's a
Hmm.
thing too. And then when I moved to the city, I actually had cats when I moved to the city as a bachelor because I couldn't really keep it. I mean, I didn't really feel like dealing with a dog.
Yeah.
But then when I got married and we had kids, we decided to get a rescue. And so we got a rescue from an organization in Scarsdale, upstate New York, that brings dogs up from the South. And that was a fantastic dog. And we loved that dog and had that dog for like 16 years. He lived for a long time. And then when was she actually, when she died, there was a sort of a mourning period. And I
Hmm.
wanted to get another dog, but my wife didn't feel like it was appropriate. We had to sort of observe this period of mourning for Foxy. We weren't really thinking about a golden doodle. My brother has a golden doodle.
Okay.
So
So
I
he was
had
first.
he
Okay.
got like a mid-sized golden doodle. He was always talking about how great their golden doodle was. So I did have that in the back of my mind, but it was really quite coincidental. We have a place in Vermont. It's a
Mm,
farm. I just sort of always want to be in a farm environment if I can. And here I am in Brooklyn, so I'm not. And there's a small town newspaper, and there was an ad in the paper, a litter of
mm,
golden doodles. A neighbor, it kind of reminded me of my youth and how we got dogs. A neighbor would get a litter, and you just get one of those dogs.
hmm.
And so we went over and saw the litter. And of course, as soon as you see a litter of golden doodles, it's very,
That's it.
very difficult to walk away from it. And I took my kids too, which
Oh,
was
that was over.
so it was over. So it was totally over. We got Herman. He was like 5 weeks at that point, and we got him when he was 9 weeks. He started in Vermont, and then he came to Brooklyn, and now he's very sort of back and forth. He's coming back from Vermont right now. So he goes from an urban environment where he's on the leash, but then off the leash in the park with all kinds of dogs,
Yeah.
like a very, very social situation, with like 100 dogs. And then he goes to Vermont where he's never on a leash, but
Mm,
he's, out in the country often by himself. And then he has a 5-hour car ride in between the two. And he's adapted to that so incredibly well. Really couldn't have a better dog for the situation in my life, going back and forth between the city and the country and being able to adjust really well socialized,
mm.
never ever fights. And if a dog is aggressive, he just lies down. He doesn't need to be the alpha dog. And I just think that's great. My son's always like, oh, why can't he be the alpha dog? And I'm like,
Why
it's
is it a
so much
goal for you? Yeah.
easier. So he's never really had a fight at all. He's really never had a day of trauma in his life. I mean, the one thing about rescue is, I mean, everybody should get a rescue when they can, but the thing about a rescue is there's this period in their life where you don't know what happened.
Mhm.
Something happened. They were out on their own for a while. There's definitely like trauma that sort of finds its way into certain behaviors.
Mhm.
And it's always a little just kind of frustrating that you can never know that period in your dog's life. Whereas with Herman, like, I kind of know every single day that he's been well loved and he's never really experienced trauma. And I think I mean, I'm so happy about that.
You do talk about a bit at the dog parks in New York. And I used to live in the East Village, but I remember this a little bit extra in Brooklyn, like the virtue signaling
Right.
of
There's a lot of it. There's a
how
lot of virtue
hard,
signaling.
how hard of a life your rescue had.
Right. And the
That
harder it was,
the
the
less legs they
higher.
have that work.
Right. The
And-
higher, yeah, or like it's like a retired greyhound or, like a pit
Mhm.
bull that was rescued from a violent situation. But those people are incredible. That
Yes.
they have the love and the care and are willing to endure whatever they have to endure
Mhm.
to take care of their dog. So yeah, those people are kind of like in the status hierarchy. I feel like they're the ones that are at the top, and I'm totally happy to give them that place because
Yes.
I do admire those folks greatly. I think the doodle people, I don't know whether the purebred people or the doodle people are at the bottom, but there's definitely not a dog to get if you're looking for like status in New York City dog parks.
No, it's really not.
There-
Or in a pet professional kind of world. I would say that purebreds are seen as more elite and
They are.
desirable
Yeah,
amongst the dog world
I
than
think so. Yeah.
doodles.
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
Absolutely. I mean, so
I
doodles get it from both sides, really.
mhm.
The purebred people resent them because, they're sort of impure breds in some way. And then the rescue people resent them because you paid for them, usually. Although there are now a lot of doodles in shelters,
Mhm.
and a lot of Herman's friends actually come from shelters and not from breeders, at least not original. I mean, yeah, they
Yeah.
came from a breeder originally, but I think what happened, and you probably discuss this a lot on your podcast, but a lot of people got doodles during the pandemic
Yes.
because they wanted a dog. It was easy to get. All these folks got doodles during the pandemic.
Mm.
They found out how expensive they were to maintain and how much time they are to kind of keep them used. And so they ended up in shelters. They
Yep.
were sort of rehomed, and you do see a lot of shelter doodles now, at least in the city. I don't know if that's true outside the city, but some people pay a lot of money. Some people get them from shelters. It's kind of all over the map.
Yes. You are correct though in the assessment that there's judgment coming from both sides.
Absolutely.
Yes. And when you and I share that we both have had standard poodles, and that's something that's said a lot, especially from the poodle organizations of why don't you just get a poodle? And I mean, God, in fact, I have on my desk, this is like a little ceramic thing I made of my standard poodle, my late poodle, and his show cut. But she died at 4.
Oh
And
no. Oh
yes,
man.
of a congenital issue.
Oh wow.
And now I know more about how I could have selected a breeder of poodles, knowing more about health testing. But just that it's a purebred dog is not a guarantee. And just because it's a doodle isn't a guarantee that they're not health tested. And that's
No.
surprising for people.
I think that is surprising. I'm actually surprised that a standard poodle you got from a breeder wasn't health tested. I mean,
Yeah. I was
but there's
younger.
no
Lesson
rules.
learned.
There's so everything is unregulated here. So you just have to sort of find a breeder that you trust, I guess.
And you talked to actually a couple of them at GANA, the Goldendoodle conference or DoodleCon, as you called it, that are in. I have like a special curated list network of doodle breeders to try to save people from going through the heartbreak I went through with my
Mm.
poodle. And Amy Lane with Fox Creek Farm, she's one of them.
Yeah.
And she
Amy's
talked
great.
about, yeah, she's wonderful. And she, for our listeners, she started mini Goldendoodles in 2002.
Yeah.
But she talks about kind of the more genetic diversity,
Yeah.
like with the third cousin rule, not breeding father
Yeah.
to daughter, et cetera. Can you share a little more what you learned there?
Yeah, so one reason I think that what Amy's doing is so great is that if you want to belong to GANA, the Golden Doodle Association of North America, you have to agree to this much more rigorous regime of health testing than the AKC requires,
Mhm.
which includes genetic testing. And also, you have to pledge that you won't breed your dog to any other dog closer than a third cousin in order to avoid the kind of inherited congenital diseases that plague the purebred world. So Amy made this commitment, and one of the experiences I had at Ghana, which was pretty powerful, was I met this breeder named Cindy Niskey, who's a South Carolina breeder, who used to breed Great Danes and was
Yeah.
a major AKC Great Dane breeder and shower. She had grand champion Great Danes, but they were plagued with these health problems, these
Hmm.
spine problems, which is common to Great Danes. And her last champion died when he was like 8, I think, or 6, maybe, young.
Yeah.
And she was so upset that she just said, I can't do this anymore. And then she heard about Ghana and the Ghana's health requirements and what they required. And she just became converted to the Goldendoodle, world, and left her AKC world behind.
Hmm.
And her AKC friends treated her like the Antichrist, is the word
Yeah.
she used, actually. That, like, how dare you breed Goldendoodles? So she actually lost quite a few friends with this choice, but she's much happier and, hasn't had this kind of issues. I mean, it's true that, golden doodles, it depends on the generation. If it's a first generation golden doodle, the parents are purebred dogs and they might have those inherited diseases,
Hmm.
but you get hybrid vigor from having two sort of relatively distinct genetic lines crossed. Now, hybrid vigor is also a very sort of like controversial
Yeah.
topic in the breeding world. Ultimately, the data isn't really definite one way or the other. But if you do a DNA test, like I did a DNA test of Herman, and you look at his coefficient of inbreeding, the COI, the number that kind of tells you how inbred your dog is, Herman had a less than 1% COI, whereas like a typical golden retriever has like a 20%, and
Hmm.
a typical purebred poodle also around a 20% COI. So, I mean, just that suggests to me that your chances are better of having a healthy dog, at least with a first generation cross, than a purebred.
Yeah.
But again, the data, it doesn't always work out that way.
Hmm. Yeah.
And,
It's not a guarantee of a healthy dog
right, there's
just
no
on its face.
guarantee,
Right.
but I just feel like you're just giving yourself a better shot
Hmm.
that way. And that was a big part of why I really ended up wanting a golden doodle and getting a golden doodle and now being like kind of an advocate of golden doodles. I just think the chances are of them being healthier than their purebred parents.
And there are misconceptions where people think I'm getting a golden just without the shedding coat and a little healthier, ignoring the poodle traits that come with. And it's not a guarantee of which we're pulling, which is why this genetic testing is wonderful. I talked to Cindy at the conference as well, and just hearing her heartbreak twofold over watching her intentionally bred champions pass so early,
Yeah,
and the grief of losing all of these friends that she had worked with and the
yeah,
respect that they had built together. There were other breeders at this conference, one of Dalmatians, one of
yeah. I
toy
met her.
poodles, who said, please don't mention my name because I'm AKC and I'm not supposed to like associate with the
Yeah.
doodle world. But this
Yeah.
is a really educational conference, and I want to talk to the vet who does the OFA hip x-rays, and I want to learn. And it's just fascinating, the politics of it all.
I had Dalmatians too, and we had I think it's gotten better, but both of our Dalmatians had hearing
Mm-hmm.
issues, which were linked to breed standards,
Mm-hmm.
breeding for more white in the body and bigger but isolated spots
Yeah.
was linked to deafness. And one of our dogs really, it's really, if you have children around a deaf dog, it can be very hazardous because
Mm-hmm.
the dog doesn't hear the child coming and can react badly if you scare it, like, come up and talk. The children don't know that.
Right.
So, yeah,
In your
yeah.
article, you dive into kind of the Victorian parallels. And when we talk about these breed standards and these accepted breeds in the AKC, these definitions haven't been around permanently. The origins of them.
Right, right. Like a lot of people think of breeds, and the AKC kind of also promotes this idea that breeds are like these ancient
Yeah.
strains of dogs that go back to the Middle Ages or even to like Roman times when they had kind of mastiff like
Mm-hmm.
dogs. And actually, I just came from Rome we took a family trip, and
Mm.
there are all these dogs in the statuary, the ancient Roman
Yeah.
statuary. You see these big, scary looking dogs. But, in fact, the whole idea of breed was basically invented in the mid 19th century. People didn't really call them or think of them as breeds. Before that, there were kind of varieties,
Mm-hmm.
but they were overlapping varieties. And it wasn't like people took pedigree seriously until the Victorian era, and people had these what they call foundational dogs. So, in the case of golden retrievers, there are these two foundational dogs that were bred in Scotland. And then, I feel like the show world has gotten a lot of criticism for these practices, but has reacted by basically just kind of closing themselves off
Mm.
from the rest of the world and kind of only really caring about what each other sort of think about what their dogs are doing or how their dogs are showing. It's a oddly, even though every year, twice a year, you see the dog shows on TV, and it is kind of a mass entertainment at that point. But in other ways, it's a very sort of closed off subculture
Mm-hmm.
of people who compete against each other, not really for money. I mean,
Right.
this is another big thing that I kind of learned in reporting this piece was like, even though, of course, their breeders do make money in the purebred world, like you don't talk about it really. You don't talk about marketing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you may sell the puppies, but you don't really advertise that much. You sort of go by word of mouth. You don't see websites on Instagram, often
Mm-hmm.
with purebred dogs for sale. That all is, and again, that's all sort of part of this sort of 19th century idea of we don't do it for money, we do it for the sort of amateur ideal of betterment of breed.
Right.
And that's a cultural difference between the purebred world and the doodle world, is that the doodle world basically started as a kind of commercial endeavor. I mean, of course, it was a guide dog originally, and bred for specific needs. People might be allergic to the kind of dogs that usually become guide dogs, which are retrievers and labs. But early on, particularly when it came to the States, it came from Australia. It was a commercial endeavor from the get-go, and there were advertising and marketing and websites,
Mm-hmm.
and it happened to kind of the doodle phenomenon kind of parallels the rise of social media.
Yeah.
So they kind of grew up together. Whereas I think for purebred breeders, like they were well established and they had their networks of people long before social media came along,
Mm-hmm.
and never really embraced it. So like, yeah, DoodleCon, there was a whole day really spent on marketing, branding and optimization of websites, and I thought that was all very refreshing and great. But I think to like a classic purebred person, maybe that would seem like grossly commercial,
Hmm.
and not what dog breeders really should be concerning themselves with. So it's a quite distinct set of cultures, these two
Yeah, you
cultures.
really explored both in person. And the derogatory kind of term that is used to label this is greeters.
Breeders.
Um,
I haven't actually heard that one.
yeah,
Okay.
that's a label that's thrown on a lot. But if you're not deemed an official breed, you can't get titles. You
Right.
can't participate in this system. So there's other ways that people have to find you. And you talk in the article about how this group of dogs, kind of this industry came in a different way from the consumer. It was consumer led
Yeah.
instead of based on the virtue of this gun dog,
Right.
hunting for the geese or whatever.
Well, I think that's another important sort of distinction is that Doodles kind of arose basically at a time when the functions that the original breeds were created for no longer existed, or only in very few cases. Most retrievers were not retrieving birds,
Mhm.
and most Dachshunds weren't going in after badgers, and all the ratting dogs weren't ratting anymore, and yet they were still kind of sold and well, not mark, they were presented to the world as for that purpose, and it was important that they have that purpose. But the fact is, they weren't fulfilling that purpose anymore.
Mhm.
So when Doodles kind of came along, it was like, well, this dog is really just for your family, and it's a companion, and it doesn't shed, so it'll keep your apartment cleaner, but it doesn't really do anything. Like, like,
They're your
yeah,
companion.
it might retrieve, it might, it might go in the water, it might swim, it might. In the case of Herman wades, but he doesn't swim, so he's kind of
Uh,
like the poodle kind of waiter, but not a retriever swimmer. Or they might not like know how to do any of that at all. But we don't care because that's not what we're getting dogs. So there was a sort of honesty to it, I
mm,
feel like, and also the idea of like a companion dog, but like a therapy dog too.
mhm.
And maybe not necessarily. I know you're not necessarily an official therapy dog, but these dogs are, I feel, very sort of emotionally available.
Yeah.
And if you're just having a bad day and you want to give your dog just a long hug and the dog, I don't know, maybe I'm imagining it, but our dog seems to really invite that kind of interaction and reward it with empathy or with some kind of emotional, give
Mhm.
back. So you just hear all these stories of these dogs in hospitals. I mean, not
Yeah.
shedding is also, I think, huge in a kind of a clinical situation,
Mhm.
where you're trying to keep things clean. I had a great conversation with this ex-soldier from Iraq
Mm.
who got into dog breeding after he got back and supplies Doodles to his buddies with PTSD. Anyway, so I do think there's a real kind of emotional component that the dogs have that does distinguish them and make them, I don't know, just particularly attached to
Yes.
people.
Australian Labradoodles, in particular, are bred for that purpose. When you have a skilled Australian Labradoodle breeder, that temperament is one of the top features that they're going
Right.
for, and they'll like lean into you.
Yeah,
And I was
that's
speaking
right. They
with,
lean on you. Yeah.
yes, I was speaking to my training mentor, Jean Donaldson. She's like the founder of positive reinforcement training, and she specializes in chows. And she said people complain all the time that doodles jump on people. And she said they're so pro-social that they want to be face to face. That's how
I
dogs greet
agree with
each other.
that. And also I think they just want to stand up like people
They
sometimes. They
do.
want to they see people
Yeah.
doing it.
And she said, "Do you know what chow owners would give to have a drop of that pro-social instinct? Like there are other breeds that you have to work so hard for them just to feel a little relaxed when a new person is around.
Really.
And doodle parents, we're struggling with you're
It's
too
the opposite.
excited for the guests to come over."
Yeah, I know. And like, I don't want Herman jumping up on people, I guess, who
Right.
don't want dogs jumping on them.
Yeah.
But when you meet somebody who gets it, they know that the dog isn't just being misbehaved.
Hmm.
The dog is actually greeting you with like a full body kind of hug.
Yeah.
And if you submit to it, it's a great feeling, you know? So I don't, so like I often, like often when I'm waiting on street corners here in the city, Herman just kind of wants to jump up and wait, like basically he's a standard Goldendoodle, so he's not that, his eye level is not that much below mine, and I'm pretty tall. So, you know, we're standing there on the corner while cars are going by, but in fact, we're having a wonderful moment together. So
When we were talking about purpose, you mentioned, often talked about kind of quote founder Wally Conron.
yeah,
And he was breeding, I think it was labs, right? Yeah, he was
yeah,
breeding
he was
labs
breeding labs.
for therapy dogs. And
Yeah,
somebody was allergic to labs. And so he crossed them with poodle.
yeah.
And so became the Labradoodle. But it is often quoted by critics of Doodles
Yeah,
that in later interviews, he said it was the greatest regret of his life and
right.
that he felt like he had built Frankenstein.
Everyone who has got a beef about Doodles quotes that, right?
Yes.
Everyone loves, if you go on like Reddit, that comes up, you know, like every other comment. And I just kind of wonder whether Wally was just having a bad day that day,
It was one
maybe.
interview. Yep.
I mean, he was, you know, well, I tried to reach him to see if he wanted to recant, you know, like, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, like, if this is your life's regret, you've had a darn good life because you actually provided a lot of joy for people like me. And surely you can recognize that, but I never could find him. I mean, if he's even alive, he's 97 years old.
Mm.
So I don't know exactly what state he's in, but I just sort of feel like he didn't really intend that to be his legacy. Like his legacy is he did this wonderful thing, and it's not like he created a Frankenstein. I feel like he just wasn't really giving us maybe what was fully in his heart. And it's not like he was the first person to cross a pool in a lab.
Right.
What he really did was name. I mean, he gave it a name. You know, he gave it that Labradoodle. He and his people, or one of his people, came up with that word.
Yes.
And I thought what was fascinating and just kind of looking at the story is, you know, nobody wanted the two siblings of the dog Sultan that ended up going to the blind allergic person.
Nobody wanted the
Uh,
mutts.
they didn't want the mutts, and
Hmm.
then he said to his people, "Well, let's call him a Labradoodle," and then everybody wanted them. It was the word that maybe he's really the
Okay.
author of, and the word did help, I guess, kind of drive the marketing, but. Yeah, I just think he's being a little hard on himself to call it his life's regret because really, I mean, he did a lot. It's a good thing. That should be his life's, you know, joy that he created these dogs.
Yeah. If anyone was going to get a final comment on it, it would have been the staff writer at the New Yorker writing a piece on it. So thank you for trying. And if we were to think back to our earlier part of our conversation, he was a leader in dog training and in breeding. And we just talked about how that community likes to preserve the breed.
Yeah,
And so that would be frowned upon. This like kind of
yeah,
invention of the doodle term, et
right,
cetera, and phenomenon. And when they become really hot, being consumer led, there have been breeders that have not health tested. And there
right,
have been puppy farms, you talked about them in Lancaster, and that luckily that demand has dropped. And that's really been thinned out a lot. People aren't making what they could hand over fist as they did during the
right,
pandemic. I could see the regret of unscrupulous breeders and
right,
people without intention, but there probably maybe was some pressure on stating some regret there if your community is all about bettering the
right,
breed.
right. I'm sure maybe in his community he got a lot of criticism for it, and And you're absolutely right. Doodles are such a commodity, and particularly during the pandemic. And it's still the case, not so much maybe the puppy mills themselves, but the puppy brokers that create
Mm,
the websites, then you never really know where, and they say they'll bring the dog to you,
yeah.
right? And so you never actually see their facility, you never meet the parents.
Hmm.
I mean, that was really why I don't think I would have never gotten a doodle that way. And if that was the only way to get doodles, I just wouldn't have gotten one.
Hmm.
But the fact that in our case, there's this person 20 minutes away, and she actually the poodle and the retriever were her dogs.
Oh, yeah.
So and she wasn't even really like I mean, she was like a hobby breeder. She had these retrievers, the grandmother, the mother, and then we had like the granddaughter of her original dog, who's the mother of Herman. And then she got a poodle like 10 years ago, and she'd had like one other litter with this poodle. So in no way was she like a puppy mill. She was like the
Right.
opposite of a puppy mill. It was a very
Yeah.
sort of artisanal, she was a registered nurse. I had just a very good feeling about her as a person.
Mm,
She was just a lot of kindness and love in this person. You could just see it right
mm,
away. That made a huge difference. I mean, I would encourage all people, I'm sure your listeners are aware of this too, just, if you can, go and visit the breeder and see the
mhm.
dogs and see where they're living, because these websites do make it, I think, for younger people, not having to wait,
Right.
having sort of like the instant gratification of
Hmm.
like an Amazon type
This puppy's
transaction.
available today. Yeah.
Right. You can have your puppy today, and just
Hmm.
click, and you see all the pictures of them. And yeah, that often leads to you're not getting your dogs from the right place, and who knows what kind of situation they were bred in. So
Yours
yeah.
sounds almost kind of romantic and meant to be, that it was the actual in a physical newspaper, the
The fact that it
listing.
was actually a classified ad in a newspaper, which also basically doesn't exist anymore,
Right.
was a big part of it. As a journalist, I felt like I've watched as newspapers and magazines, and I'm really a magazine writer, but
Hmm.
the same thing has happened. I've watched as the ads and the whole business model has disappeared,
Right.
with the rise of Facebook. And the New Yorker is kind of a unique case because the subscribers are so loyal
Hmm.
that it's not driven by ads, it's driven by subscriptions, and the subscribers almost always resubscribe. So we're fortunate, but basically every other publication has suffered greatly, and many have closed. So the fact that I was like supporting the local paper
Yeah.
and showing that classified ads actually still serve a purpose, and connecting it with stuff you want was, to me, important part of the whole thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that one of the breeders gave you a live, laugh, bark little doodle calendar.
That was Cindy.
Yes. And that you thought maybe you're ready for the double doodle life, that you might think
Well,
of getting another.
we do now talk constantly about getting another dog, just because Herman is, whenever he's with other dogs, he's just always
Oh,
happy, and it would take a little bit of the pressure off us to keep him amused. But I think we would probably not get a doodle. I think like Lisa in particular, it was like the karma imbalance of having two doodles rather than having like a doodle and a rescue. Like having a doodle and a rescue would kind of balance it
there
out.
you go.
But having like two doodles would be like a heavy karma load on that one side. And
You don't know if
I
you could
don't
walk into the dog park as proud, your head is
I don't
high.
I don't know. I just think that, yeah, we cover our moral basis a little bit better if we ended up with a rescue. So I think that will probably be our next dog. And I think we probably will get a second dog. The other thing is, like children who came with us to
Yeah.
meet the dog, and part of the whole bargain was that they were going to be the help look after the dog. That
The
went
eternal
out the window
promise.
very quickly. Right. I'm the one, and Lisa's the one, and the kids are very rarely involved.
And are the kids
Uh,
grown now?
well, my son's 27, but
Yeah.
my daughter's 17, so she's still in the house.
Yeah.
Although she's going to college next year, she's not someone that takes the dog out for a lot of walks. When it was a puppy, she was happy because like everybody loved the puppy and it was so cute.
Right.
It was unbelievable walking along the sidewalk with a doodle puppy.
Oh,
It was it was so that period was just so memorable. Like everybody would see the dog coming on the sidewalk and would just like it's incredible what puppies do to people. They
yes.
just go nuts.
I'm going to
They go
steal your
nuts.
term, Gigil. Am I saying it right then?
It's Gigil, yeah.
Yes.
Gigil.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like overflowing with them.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
The emotion of Gigil is provoked by these. I mean, I guess all puppies are incredibly cute, but the doodle with the teddy bear features and
Mhm.
everything is just out of this off the charts cute.
Did I
Yeah.
miss anything discussing your article or anything that you would like to cover? This has been a
Um,
delight.
let me just think about it for a second. I mean,
Sure.
it was like I just thought it was interesting. The AKC, I reached out on a number of occasions. I mean, you think of the New Yorker and dogs,
Yeah.
you think of the cartoons. There's a long history. New Yorker's 100 years old, literally. It's 101 now. We had our 100th anniversary last year, and in that history, there have been many, many, many cartoons of different kinds, mostly purebred dogs.
Right.
And there's like we have a book of dog cartoons. There's like a calendar of dog cartoons, and you got to feel like the audience, the New Yorker audience, is probably a fairly purebred, sort of loving type audience. So when I reached out to the AKC to say I'm doing this, a long article about dogs and gold doodles, but I'm looking to get both sides. You would
Right.
think the AKC would at least talk to me, but they are so like defensive and like just assume right away that anybody who's running about doodles has got nothing but bad things to say about the AKC that they wouldn't even speak to me. I mean, not even off the record. It was just like we don't talk about doodles. We don't speak about doodles, period.
Mm.
And I just found that like here's an organization that's gone from, like in the early 90s, like can't remember off the top of my head, but the number of registrations that they had in the early 90s compared to the number of registrations today has declined by 2/3.
Mm. 2/3
fewer dogs are registered. Maybe people are getting purebreds and not registering them, but it's really an organization in crisis. And part of the reason I think is they've gotten themselves into this box, where like all this stuff has happened in the dog world with doodles that they have taken such a negative view of that they can't. So, no doodles are breeds. I mean,
Right.
maybe one day they will be, but think of all the registrations they would gain if they registered. And you're not going to register the first generations, maybe because the genetics are unpredictable. But
Mhm.
we're in a world now where multi-gen doodles are very common. Amy
Yes.
Lane only sells multi-gen doodles.
Yeah. With
And
long
these
lines. Yeah.
right, and these lines these dogs are true bred. I mean, they breed true. There's not a lot of, variation. So really they do have all the qualities of breeds. Amy Lane doesn't want to be a part of the AKC, but the Australian Labradoodles have made an effort to be
Mhm.
registered. And so I just feel like the AKC needs to kind of like reorient their mentality and get out of this defensive crouch they found themselves in. That was
Mm.
my experience anyway.
That's fascinating. And part of why I exist is in the training world, people don't really talk about doodles or it's done so with disdain. I have like a highly accredited dog training friend who confided in me, I'm so glad you exist to work with doodles so I don't have to. And that's a common refrain. We talk about that kind of enthusiasm and exercise need, et cetera, and that some people think they're kind of plug and play and their needs are a bit higher than that, than what some people expected. But to
For
just
sure.
not entertain the conversation from an AKC, that's really interesting.
Just seems like they're shooting themselves in the foot. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, thank you for
Yeah.
that insight. Is there anything else you feel like we should cover?
No, I think that's it. I think we got it.
Wonderful. Thank you. I really enjoyed this article, and I'm glad Herman comes home. And this has been such a pleasure.
All right, Corinne. Well, thanks for having me on the show. I really
Thank you
liked
so
it. It's
much.
fun talking to you.
Wonderful. And I'll reach out to you once this is ready.
Please.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
Have a
See
good
ya.
day. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.